It feels like a simple action. Your foot presses down on the metal blade, the shovel cuts into the soil, and a small section of earth lifts upward. From everyday experience, it seems almost trivial, but hidden inside that small movement is a complicated story told by physics. When your foot pushes the shovel downward, your body is producing force. That force begins deep inside your muscles. Muscles are not simple ropes that pull bones. They are intricate biological machines made of countless microscopic structures. Inside every muscle fiber are tiny molecular motors made from proteins. These proteins slide past one another, shortening the muscle and creating motion. At the smallest level, these movements are powered by chemical reactions. Your body stores energy inside molecules such as glucose and ATP. When these molecules break apart in your cells, they release energy. That energy powers the microscopic motors that pull your muscle fibers together. As billions of these tiny pulls happen simultaneously, your leg presses down on the shovel. From your perspective, you are just digging. From the perspective of physics, chemical energy is being converted into mechanical work. But the shovel is not moving through empty space. It meets resistance immediately because the soil pushes back. Every particle in the soil presses against the metal blade. Tiny grains of sand, fragments of rock, and pieces of organic material all interact with the surface of the shovel. These interactions create friction and pressure that oppose the force from your body. The interesting thing is that soil behaves in a very unusual way. It is not quite a solid, and it is not quite a liquid. Scientists describe materials like soil as granular matter. Granular materials consist of many small particles that interact through contact and friction rather than chemical bonds. Because of this structure, granular materials behave strangely. If you pour sand from a bucket, it flows like a liquid. But if you stand on the same sand, it supports your weight like a solid surface. Shake a container of sand, and the particles rearrange themselves into new structures. Physicists have spent decades trying to understand these systems. Surprisingly, the mathematics describing granular materials is still incomplete. Predicting exactly how millions of tiny particles will move under pressure is extremely difficult. So every time you push a shovel into the ground, you are interacting with a material that scientists still struggle to fully explain. At the same moment, something equally interesting is happening inside your body. As your muscles work harder, they require more energy. Your breathing becomes deeper and faster because your cells need oxygen to continue producing energy from food molecules. This process happens through a series of chemical reactions inside your cells. Oxygen helps break down glucose molecules, releasing energy that powers muscle contractions. But not all of that energy becomes motion. In fact, most of it becomes heat. The human body is not a perfectly efficient machine. Only a portion of the chemical energy inside food becomes useful mechanical work. The rest spreads through your tissues as thermal energy. This is why your body slowly warms up as you dig, lift soil, and move around the garden. You might not notice it immediately, but after a few minutes of digging, your skin becomes warmer and your breathing changes. Your body has essentially become a biological engine, converting stored chemical energy into motion and heat. And all of this begins with something that seems incredibly simple, pushing a shovel into the earth. A small act in a garden, when examined closely, reveals a hidden network of forces, particles, energy transformations, and microscopic machines working together under the same physical laws that govern the entire universe. After several minutes of gardening, something subtle begins to change inside your body. Your breathing becomes deeper. Your heart begins to beat faster. Your skin slowly grows warm, and sometimes small drops of sweat begin forming on your forehead or arms. These reactions may feel ordinary, but they are actually the result of a complex physical system trying to maintain balance. To understand what is happening, it helps to think of the human body as a kind of machine governed by the laws of thermodynamics. In physics, thermodynamics describes how energy moves and transforms. Any system that performs work must consume energy and release some of that energy in different forms. When you dig soil, pull weeds, or carry water in a garden, your muscles perform mechanical work. That work requires energy. Your body obtains this energy from food molecules that were previously stored in your cells. These molecules, such as glucose and fatty acids, contain chemical bonds that hold energy inside them. When your muscles start working harder, your body begins breaking these molecules apart faster. This process happens inside structures called mitochondria, which exist inside nearly every cell in your body. Mitochondria act like microscopic power stations. They take oxygen and fuel molecules and run a series of chemical reactions that release energy step by step. But there is an important detail that surprises many people. The human body is not a very efficient machine. When fuel burns inside a car engine, only a portion of that energy moves the vehicle forward. Much of the energy becomes heat that escapes through the engine and exhaust. Something very similar happens in your body. When your cells release energy from glucose, only about 20 to 25% of that energy becomes useful mechanical motion. The remaining energy spreads through your tissues as heat. This means that most of the energy used during gardening is actually warming your body. At first, that warmth might feel comfortable. But if too much heat builds up, it can become dangerous. The brain and internal organs must stay within a narrow temperature range in order to function properly. So your body activates a cooling system. Sweat glands in your skin begin releasing small amounts of water onto the surface of your body. As this water spreads across your skin, something important happens. The water begins to evaporate. Evaporation is not just water disappearing, it is a physical process that requires energy. When water molecules escape into the air as vapor, they carry thermal energy with them. This means that every drop of sweat removes heat from your body. It is a remarkably efficient cooling system built entirely from simple physical principles. As long as sweat can evaporate from your skin, your body can release excess heat and maintain a stable internal temperature. At the same time, your heart works harder to circulate blood throughout your body. Blood carries oxygen to your muscles so they can continue producing energy. It also transports heat away from active muscles toward the skin, where that heat can escape into the surrounding air. All of these changes happen automatically without conscious effort. You simply continue digging, planting, or watering, while your body quietly manages an enormous number of chemical reactions and energy transfers. From a scientific perspective, gardening turns your body into a dynamic thermodynamic system. Energy enters through food, oxygen fuels chemical reactions, muscles perform mechanical work, and excess heat flows outward into the environment. The entire process follows the same physical laws that govern engines, power plants, and even stars. Yet when you are standing in a garden, it rarely feels like you are participating in a complicated thermodynamic experiment. It simply feels like working with the earth. Now shift your attention from your body to the soil itself. When you kneel down in a garden and scoop up a handful of earth, it appears simple, just dark dirt, small stones, maybe a few pieces of dried leaves. But in reality, that handful of soil is one of the most complex environments on Earth. Inside it exists a microscopic world that is almost impossible to see without scientific tools. A single gram of healthy soil can contain billions of microorganisms. These include bacteria, fungi, microscopic algae, and tiny creatures like protozoa and nematodes. They move, feed, compete, and cooperate in ways that resemble a bustling ecosystem, all within a space smaller than a sugar cube. When you begin gardening, digging, turning the soil, pulling plants out, this hidden world is disturbed. Soil particles shift and break apart. Tiny pockets of air are released. Microorganisms that were buried deep underground suddenly move closer to the surface where oxygen and sunlight are available. At the same time, your body comes into contact with this ecosystem. Your hands touch the soil. Small particles cling to your skin. Some microorganisms become airborne when dry soil is disturbed, and you may breathe them in without even noticing. This interaction between humans and soil has been happening for thousands of years, long before anyone understood the science behind it. Your body is not defenseless against these microscopic encounters. In fact, your immune system is constantly observing and learning from them. The immune system is often described as a protective barrier, but it is better understood as an information processing system. It studies the molecules and organisms it encounters, deciding which ones are harmful and which ones are harmless. Exposure to different microbes can help train the immune system, allowing it to respond more accurately to threats. Without this exposure, the The immune system may sometimes react too strongly or too weakly. Some scientists believe that modern lifestyles, especially those spent mostly indoors, reduce contact with environmental microbes that humans historically encountered while interacting with soil, plants, and animals. Gardening quietly restores some of that lost interaction. But the story becomes even more intriguing when researchers begin looking at the possible effects on the brain. Certain soil bacteria produce chemical compounds that can influence biological processes inside the human body. Some early studies suggest that exposure to these microbes might affect the production of neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers that help brain cells communicate. Neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine play important roles in regulating mood, attention, and stress. The idea that soil microbes might influence these systems is still being studied, and scientists are careful not to make strong conclusions yet. The human body is incredibly complicated, and isolating the exact cause of changes in mood or mental state is extremely difficult. Nevertheless, the possibility itself reveals something fascinating. When you garden, you are not simply moving dirt around. You are briefly connecting your body to a vast biological network that has existed long before humans ever appeared. Microorganisms in the soil are constantly exchanging chemical signals with plants, recycling nutrients, and maintaining the fertility of the earth. The physics behind these interactions is essentially the movement of molecules and information. Chemical signals travel through water films between soil particles. Nutrients dissolve diffuse and are absorbed by roots. Microbes break down organic matter, releasing atoms that will later become part of new plants. From a distance, a garden may look calm and quiet, but beneath the surface, an enormous amount of activity is taking place. And the moment you place your hands into the soil, your body becomes part of that hidden world. If you step back and look at a garden from a wider perspective, something remarkable becomes clear. Every leaf, stem, and fruit in that space is powered by energy that traveled across space from the sun. The garden is not just a collection of plants growing in soil. It is a place where energy from a distant star is being captured, transformed, and stored. The sun constantly releases enormous amounts of energy in the form of light. This light travels roughly 150 million kilometers through empty space before reaching Earth. Each tiny packet of light energy is called a photon. These photons carry energy that can interact with matter when they arrive on our planet. When sunlight strikes the leaves of a plant, something extraordinary happens. Inside each leaf are microscopic structures called chloroplasts. These structures contain a green pigment known as chlorophyll, which is responsible for absorbing sunlight. When photons hit chlorophyll molecules, the energy of the light excites electrons inside those molecules. This is the beginning of one of the most important chemical processes on Earth, photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, the energy from sunlight is used to rearrange atoms from carbon dioxide in the air and water from the soil. Through a complex series of reactions, plants build sugar molecules from these simple ingredients. These sugar molecules store energy in their chemical bonds. In other words, plants are converting sunlight into stored chemical energy. This process is so fundamental that nearly all life on Earth depends on it. Plants become the primary producers of energy within ecosystems. Animals, including humans, cannot directly capture energy from sunlight in the way plants do. Instead, we obtain that stored energy by eating plants or by eating other organisms that have eaten plants. When you grow vegetables in a garden, the same process is taking place. A tomato plant, for example, spends weeks collecting energy from sunlight and storing it inside the sugars that form its fruit. The plant is essentially acting as a biological battery, charging itself with solar energy. When you later pick that tomato and eat it, your body begins breaking those sugar molecules apart. Inside your cells, chemical reactions release the stored energy that originally came from sunlight. That energy then powers your muscles, your brain, and countless other processes inside your body. This means that the energy allowing you to dig soil, carry watering cans, or harvest vegetables may have left the sun only days or weeks earlier. The path of that energy is surprisingly direct. It traveled from the sun as light, was captured by a plant through photosynthesis, stored inside molecules of sugar, and then released again inside your body. From a physics perspective, Gardening connects human activity directly to stellar processes. Even the warmth you feel while working in the garden is partly influenced by this energy flow. Sunlight warms the ground and the air around you. Plants absorb some of that energy, and your own body absorbs some as well. At the same time, the food you previously ate, perhaps even food grown in another garden somewhere, continues to fuel your movements. This constant exchange of energy reveals a deeper truth about life on Earth. Living organisms are not isolated systems. They are part of a continuous energy flow that begins with the sun and moves through plants, animals, and ecosystems before eventually dispersing as heat into the environment. A garden may appear quiet and still, but in reality it is a place where sunlight is being transformed into life every single moment. Something unusual begins to happen to the way you experience time when you spend long periods in a garden. Modern life often moves at an extremely fast pace. Messages arrive instantly, information travels across the world in fractions of a second, and many activities produce immediate results. The human brain gradually adapts to this speed. It becomes accustomed to quick feedback and rapid changes in attention. Gardening operates on a completely different time scale. When you plant a seed, there is usually no immediate reward. The seed disappears beneath the soil, and for days nothing visible happens. From the outside, the garden appears unchanged, but beneath the surface, a series of physical and biological processes begin almost immediately. The first step is water absorption. When the seed is placed in moist soil, water molecules slowly enter the seed through its protective outer layer. This process is driven by diffusion and pressure differences between the inside and outside of the seed. As water enters, the internal tissues swell and previously dormant chemical pathways become active. Enzymes begin breaking down stored starches inside the seed. These molecules provide the initial energy needed for growth. Cells begin dividing and the embryo inside the seed starts expanding. Soon a small root emerges. This root almost always grows downward into the soil. At first glance, it might look as if the plant somehow knows which direction is down. But the explanation lies in physics and cellular chemistry. Plant cells contain structures that can sense the direction of gravity. These structures shift slightly when the orientation of the plant changes. The movement triggers chemical signals that cause certain cells to grow faster than others. As a result, the root curves and grows downward in response to gravity. This process is known as gravitropism. At the same time, another structure begins growing upward toward the surface. This shoot moves in the opposite direction, guided partly by gravity and partly by light. When the shoot reaches sunlight, cells on the shaded side of the stem begin growing faster than those on the illuminated side. This uneven growth causes the plant to bend toward the light source. This phenomenon is called phototropism. Both of these processes demonstrate how plants respond to physical forces in their environment. They are not conscious decisions but automatic reactions created by chemical gradients and cellular mechanics. Yet these reactions unfold slowly. Hours pass, then days, and eventually small green leaves appear above the soil. This slower rhythm has an interesting effect on the human brain. When you spend time gardening, you begin paying attention to processes that cannot be rushed. You notice subtle changes, a new leaf forming, soil drying in the sun, insects moving between plants. Neuroscientists studying attention have observed that repetitive physical activities can shift the brain away from constant internal thinking. The brain has networks responsible for planning, worrying, remembering, and imagining future events. These networks are useful, but when they become overactive, they can dominate our thoughts. Activities like gardening appear to quiet these internal patterns and shift attention toward sensory experiences. The texture of soil, the smell of plants, the warmth of sunlight, and the sound of wind become more noticeable. However, scientists still debate exactly why this shift occurs. It may involve the combination of physical movement, outdoor environments, sunlight exposure, and the slower pace of natural processes. The truth is that the human brain evolved in environments where change often happened gradually rather than instantly. Gardening reconnects the mind to that slower timeline, where growth unfolds quietly beneath the surface long before it becomes visible above the ground. If you watch a garden over a long period of time, a pattern slowly becomes visible. Plants grow from small seeds, stretch upward toward the sunlight, produce leaves and fruit, and eventually begin to weaken. Leaves turn yellow or brown, stems dry out, and parts of the plant fall back into the soil. At first glance, this cycle looks like a simple story of life followed by death. But physics tells a different story. From a physical perspective, nothing in this process truly disappears. Matter does not vanish when a plant withers. The atoms that formed its leaves, roots, and fruit remain in the environment. They simply change their arrangement and become part of new systems. When a leaf falls onto the soil, microorganisms begin breaking it down. Bacteria and fungi slowly digest the organic material. They release enzymes that split complex molecules into smaller pieces. Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are reduced to simpler chemical components. During this process, carbon atoms may combine with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, which returns to the atmosphere. Other atoms remain in the soil as nutrients such as nitrogen compounds, phosphorus, and potassium. These nutrients dissolve in water and spread through the soil, where they may later be absorbed by the roots of other plants. This transformation happens continuously beneath the surface of a garden. What appears to be decay is actually a process of recycling. The same atoms that once formed a leaf may eventually become part of a new plant, a microorganism, or even the air itself. The human body participates in this cycle as well. Every time you eat food from a plant, you are incorporating atoms from that plant into your own body. The carbon atoms in your muscles, the nitrogen in your proteins, and the oxygen moving through your blood may all have once been part of soil, water, or living organisms. These atoms do not remain in your body forever. Through breathing, sweating, and natural biological processes, they eventually return to the environment. The carbon you exhale as carbon dioxide may later be absorbed by plants during photosynthesis. Water leaving your body may evaporate and eventually fall again as rain. Gardening makes this continuous movement of matter easier to see. You place a seed in the soil and watch it grow into a plant. That plant gathers atoms from the air, water, and earth, building them into leaves, stems, and fruit. Later, when parts of the plant decay, those same atoms return to the soil to begin the process again. From a scientific perspective, this cycle follows one of the most fundamental principles of physics, the conservation of matter. Atoms are not created or destroyed during ordinary biological processes. They simply rearrange into new structures. Over long periods of time, the atoms that make up living organisms travel through many different forms. Some may spend years in the soil, others may move through plants and animals, and still others may circulate through the atmosphere. A garden is therefore not just a place where plants grow. It is a small visible section of a much larger planetary system in which matter is constantly moving, transforming, and reorganizing itself. Every leaf, every root, and every handful of soil represents a moment in that endless physical cycle. When someone stands quietly in a garden, the scene can feel calm and almost motionless. Leaves move gently in the wind, sunlight touches the soil, and plants grow so slowly that their movement is impossible to see in real time. But if you examine the situation from the perspective of physics, the garden is anything but still. It is a dense network of processes where energy and matter are constantly flowing. Sunlight is arriving from space every second. Those photons carry energy that began deep inside the sun's core during nuclear reactions. After traveling across millions of kilometers of empty space, they reach Earth and strike the surface of leaves. In that moment, part of that energy becomes captured inside chemical bonds through photosynthesis. The plants in the garden become temporary storage systems for that energy. Their tissues grow by rearranging atoms taken from carbon dioxide in the air and minerals in the soil. The garden slowly builds structures, stems, roots, leaves, and fruits, using matter that once floated freely in the atmosphere or rested quietly underground. Meanwhile, the soil beneath those plants is full of microscopic activity. Bacteria and fungi break down organic material, releasing nutrients that travel through thin films of water between soil particles. Roots extend through these spaces, absorbing the dissolved molecules they need to continue growing. Water moves constantly through the system as well. Rain enters the soil, travels through roots, rises through plant tissues, and eventually escapes from leaves as vapor. This process, known as transpiration, returns water to the atmosphere where it may later form clouds and fall again as rain somewhere else on the planet. Even the air around the garden participates in this exchange. Carbon dioxide enters plant leaves and becomes part of sugars during photosynthesis. Oxygen leaves those same leaves and mixes with the surrounding atmosphere, eventually reaching the lungs of animals and humans. Now consider your own body while standing in that garden. With every breath you inhale oxygen that plants released earlier. With every exhale you return carbon dioxide that plants will later use again. The atoms move continuously between living systems, crossing boundaries that seem solid from a human perspective, but are actually very porous. The food that fuels your muscles likely began as sunlight captured by plants weeks or months earlier. When your body uses that energy, it releases heat that spreads into the surrounding air. Even the warmth of your skin becomes part of the energy flow passing through the garden. From a physical standpoint, the separation between you and the environment begins to look less clear. Your body is not isolated from the system around it. Instead, it acts as a temporary participant within a larger network of exchanges. Atoms enter your body through food, water, and air. Later they leave again through breathing, movement, and biological processes. Energy flows through you in much the same way. It enters through chemical bonds in food and eventually disperses as heat into the environment. The garden simply makes this process easier to notice. What appears to be a quiet place of plants and soil is actually a dynamic system shaped by the laws of physics. Matter is continuously reorganizing itself, and energy is constantly moving from one form to another. Seen from this perspective, gardening becomes more than a practical activity. It becomes a small moment where a conscious organism interacts directly with the larger physical processes that shape life on Earth. The soil, the plants, the sunlight, and your own body are all participating in the same ongoing transformation of matter and energy. And recognizing that connection can quietly change the way reality itself begins to look.